The morning light always came in soft through the kitchen window, landing right on the old oak table where my husband used to sit with his coffee. That spot still smelled faintly of cedar and cinnamon, even after all these years. Eddie had been gone for over a decade. But somehow, I still felt him here, in the quiet moments. In the hum of the refrigerator. In the click of my old camera shutter. I wiped the dust from a picture frame. One of the few I hadn't moved in 40 years. It was our wedding photo. Faded at the edges. But still the same smile. The same hope. Portland was waking up outside my window. A crow cawed somewhere over the street. The roses Eddie planted by the mailbox had started blooming early this year. Frank Donovan, my neighbor, was trimming his hedge across the street. He waved his clippers in greeting and called out, "Maggie, you should enter some of those photos of yours in the community show next month. They're too good to be sitting in a box." I laughed softly. They're just old memories. "Frank, that's the point," he said, smiling. "Memories are what make people stop and look." He didn't know how right he was. I should have listened to him more closely that morning. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was Daniel. My son. He rarely called this early. I answered with a smile in my voice. "Morning. Sweetheart. Everything all right?" His tone was cautious. Too polite. "Yeah. Mom. Hey. I wanted to ask if maybe Vanessa and I could stay with you for a little while. Just until we figure things out." I set the coffee cup down slowly. "Figure what out?" He hesitated. Then sighed. "You know. Rent's been crazy high. And my job cut back hours. Vanessa's between contracts right now. And we thought, well, your place has that guest room. And it's just temporary." Temporary. That word has a way of stretching itself. Still, he was my only child. "Of course," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "You know there's always room for you here." He seemed relieved. "You're the best." "Mom, we'll drive over this afternoon." After he hung up, I stared at the phone, feeling that strange mix of excitement and worry. I'd been lonely. Sure. But the quiet had a rhythm. A peace. I wasn't sure how another person's energy would fit into it again. Let alone, too. Still. I told myself it would be nice to have the sound of life in the house again. I spent the next few hours tidying up. I dusted the mantel where Eddie's camera sat. Cleaned the picture frames. Folded clean sheets for the guest room. I even baked banana bread. Because Daniel always loved it as a boy. As I moved from room to room, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Same woman. Just a little grayer. A little softer around the eyes. I whispered, "You can do this, Maggie." By the time their car pulled into the driveway, the sun had begun to dip behind the fir trees, turning the sky a pale gold. I watched from the window as Daniel got out first. He looked tired. Older than 38. His hairline was starting to fade. And his shoulders slumped in that way. Men carry invisible weight. Then she stepped out. Vanessa. I'd met her only twice before. She was stunning in a polished, effortless way. The kind of woman who could make a grocery run look like a magazine shoot. Her hair was sleek. Nails manicured. Sunglasses oversized. She scanned the house like an inspector checking a property listing. When they came inside, I opened my arms. "Welcome home." Daniel hugged me quickly. Already distracted by his phone, Vanessa gave a polite half-smile. "It's really cute. Maggie. So, vintage. You can tell it has history." I smiled, unsure if it was a compliment or a warning. "Yes, it does. Every corner has a story." She nodded, her gaze drifting over the living room. The framed photographs. The crocheted blanket on the sofa. The antique clock that chimed every hour, None of it seemed to impress her. She set her purse on the counter, pulled out her phone, and started snapping pictures. Daniel frowned. "Vanessa, what are you doing?" She shrugged. "Just taking notes. The lighting's good, but it feels a little dark. I could really modernize this place. A few updates, maybe some lighter furniture. New curtains." I folded my hands, steadying my voice. "I like it the way it is." She smiled sweetly, but her eyes didn't match. "Of course, Maggie, just suggestions." As Daniel carried their bags upstairs, Vanessa lingered in the living room, touching things she didn't need to touch: the frame of my wedding picture, the clock Eddie had fixed 3 times, the vase we'd bought at a flea market on our first anniversary. She paused at the mantel and picked up Eddie's camera. "That's older than I thought," she said, holding it up to her eye. "Film, right? It still works," I said. "He used to say you could capture a soul if you looked long enough through the lens." Vanessa laughed lightly. "That's kind of creepy." She set it down carelessly, the metal clinking against the wood. I flinched. She didn't notice. After dinner, we sat at the table, but the conversation never really settled. Daniel talked about bills and deadlines. Vanessa talked about design clients, influencer marketing, and trends. I listened, smiling when expected, nodding at the right places, though my thoughts wandered back to the pictures still hanging on the walls behind them. When they went upstairs, I stayed behind to clean up. The dishes clinked softly in the sink. I looked around the kitchen, my sanctuary, and tried to ignore the new scent of Vanessa's expensive perfume lingering in the air. Before going to bed, I walked into the living room one last time. The lamp cast a warm glow on the mantel, but something felt off. The wedding picture was turned around, face to the wall. I frowned, reached for it, and turned it back. Eddie's eyes met mine again. Steady, patient, like he always was. I whispered, "Don't worry, love. It's still our home." But as I climbed the stairs, I caught sight of Vanessa's open laptop on the dining table, the glow from the screen still on. A window was open to a design app. There were notes typed across a picture of my house: full remodel, remove clutter, minimalist aesthetic, complete transformation. I stood there in the dark for a long moment, the word transformation echoing in my mind. Then I turned off the light and went upstairs. That night, I dreamed of boxes, someone packing away my photographs, my memories, one by one, until the shelves were empty and the walls bare. When I woke before dawn, the house was silent again, but it no longer felt peaceful. It felt like it was holding its breath. The next morning, I found Vanessa in the living room, already moving things around. She had the energy of a woman on a mission. Boxes half open, a trash bag at her feet. My breath caught when I saw what she was holding. It was Eddie's old ceramic mug, the one with the crack on the handle that he used every morning for 30 years. I said her name softly, trying not to sound sharp. "Vanessa, what are you doing with that?" She looked up, cheerful, as if she were doing me a favor. "Just clearing some space. Maggie, there's so much clutter in here. It'll look bigger once we get rid of some of these old things." Old things. The way she said it stung. She placed the mug inside the trash bag like it meant nothing and turned back toward the shelves. I took a deep breath, my pulse quickening. "Please leave those shelves alone. Everything there has meaning." She stopped for a second, glanced over her shoulder, then smiled sweetly. "Of course, Maggie. I was just tidying up." But later, when I checked again, half the knickknacks were gone. The little glass bird Eddie had bought me from a roadside store in Arizona, the seashell from our honeymoon in Florida, the picture of Daniel as a baby wearing his father's hat, all gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air in the house felt thinner, as if something had been taken out of it, besides objects. Around midnight, I went downstairs for water. The kitchen light was off, but I could hear rustling in the garage. I followed the sound quietly. Heart thumping. The door was slightly open. Vanessa was standing near the recycling bin, tossing things in. Under the dim light, I recognized a torn piece of our anniversary card. The one Eddie had written in his neat, careful handwriting. My throat tightened. I flicked the light switch. She froze. Vanessa, what are you doing with that? She turned, blinking against the sudden brightness. Oh, you scared me. I was just cleaning out some of the old boxes from the hallway. They were falling apart. I stepped closer and saw the truth. It wasn't random trash. It was mine. My memories. Years of them. That's not yours to throw away, I said, my voice shaking. She sighed, rubbing her temple like I was being unreasonable. Maggie, please. You've got to let go of some of this stuff. It's just collecting dust. Nobody needs old cards and pictures from decades ago. They're not just pictures. They're my life. She rolled her eyes slightly. Well, sometimes holding on keeps you stuck. You should think about that. I wanted to scream. But instead, I reached into the trash bag and started pulling things out. My hands trembled as I gathered torn photos, faded letters, scraps of the life I had built. She didn't stop me. She just shrugged and left the garage, muttering something about my being sentimental. I stayed there long after she went upstairs. The house creaked with the wind outside. My knees hurt from crouching on the concrete floor, but I kept digging through the bag. Every time my fingers found something familiar, it felt like finding a heartbeat that had almost been lost. In the morning, I placed what I'd salvaged on the kitchen table and tried to piece them back together. Some photos were beyond saving, water-damaged or torn. One, of Eddie laughing with Daniel on his shoulders, had a rip straight through their faces. I pressed the halves together like it might make time reverse. When Daniel came downstairs, I showed him the pile. Look what she did, I said quietly. He rubbed his eyes, still half asleep. Mom, she didn't mean anything. Vanessa's just trying to help clean up. I stared at him. You think throwing away our family history is helping? He looked uncomfortably, like he wanted to be anywhere but there. Mom, they're just things. You can't keep everything forever. I swallowed hard. Those things are what I have left of your father. He looked at the floor and didn't answer. Later that afternoon, I found myself alone again. The house felt heavier than usual. The rooms looked the same, but the silence between the walls had changed. I walked to the back porch, needing air. The roses by the fence had started to wilt. I tried trimming them, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. By sunset, I decided to check the trash outside. Something in me needed to know just how much she had thrown away. The air was cool, and the scent of rain hung low. I opened the lid of the big black bin, and there it was. A large trash bag sat right on top, filled to the brim. I tore it open. Inside were photo albums. The blue one with the lace corners, the leather-bound one Eddie had bought for our trip to Yellowstone. Even the small pocket album I used to carry in my purse. My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. I dragged the bag back inside, leaving a trail of dust across the floor. One by one, I laid the photos out on the table. Eddie in the backyard, covered in sawdust from building the deck. Daniel, as a boy, grinning with missing teeth. Me, standing in front of the ocean, my hair wild from the wind. Most were fine. Some were creased, but a few had coffee stains, like they'd been sitting under the garbage before I found them. When I heard footsteps, I looked up. Vanessa stood at the doorway, arms crossed. Oh, for God's sake. Maggie, You're really digging through trash now. I straightened, clutching the album to my chest. You threw away my life. She laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. Your life, their pictures. Dusty. Yellowed pieces of paper. Let them go. No. I said quietly. You don't get to decide what I let go of. Her smile tightened. But she didn't respond. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor until the sound disappeared up the stairs. I stayed there until the moonlight slipped across the floor. The air smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. I gathered every photo, every scrap I could find, and stacked them neatly on the table. My hands were steady now. When I finally went upstairs, Daniel was asleep. Vanessa's laughter drifted faintly from behind their door, mixed with the muffled sound of a television show. In the dark hallway, I stopped outside their room. I could hear her voice, low and amused. She said something like she'd make this house feel modern and fresh in no time. I turned away. My reflection followed me down the hall in the dim light. The old woman who'd once been soft and trusting, who was now learning how it felt to be erased piece by piece. Downstairs, the clock Eddie had fixed all those years ago ticked steadily, like a heartbeat I could still count on. I whispered into the silence, almost afraid of hearing myself say it aloud. This is still my home. The next morning would bring more than I was ready for. But I didn't know that yet. For now, I just sat at the table, watching the first hint of dawn slide across the pictures I'd rescued, their edges curling but still intact. By the time the sun was fully up, the house no longer felt like mine. Vanessa's music played from her phone somewhere upstairs, a pulsing rhythm that didn't belong to the quiet home Eddie and I had built. The smell of her perfume drifted through the hallways, floral and sharp, cutting through the scent of coffee that usually filled the mornings. I sat at the kitchen table with my rescued photos spread in front of me, trying to make sense of how everything could shift so quickly. When Daniel came down, I tried again to talk to him. You need to tell her to stop going through my things, I said. He looked tired, his shirt untucked, dark circles under his eyes. Mom, she's just trying to make the place more comfortable. You know how she is. She likes order. Order. I laughed quietly. It's not her house. Daniel. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. I know. But we're all living here now. Maybe it's time for some change. I stared at him, trying to find the boy who used to run barefoot in the backyard, chasing Eddie's laughter. Instead, I saw a man worn down by someone else's rules. I wanted to reach out, shake him, make him see what was happening. But the words wouldn't come. Later that afternoon, Vanessa found me in the living room, dusting the mantel. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. Maggie, I've been thinking. We should repaint this room. Maybe white. Something bright and airy. It doesn't need painting, I said. She walked in, running her hand along the edge of the bookshelf. This dark wood feels heavy. If we want to modernize, we should start here. I set the rag down and turned to face her. This isn't a project. Vanessa, this is my home. She smiled politely, but her voice stayed cool. Our home now. Right, we all live here. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. The confidence in her tone chilled me more than the words themselves. That evening I cooked dinner. Something simple. Pasta with garlic bread. I'd done it hundreds of times before. But that night, the house felt smaller, the air thicker. Vanessa sat scrolling through her phone while Daniel talked about work, barely tasting the food. I watched them both and realized I didn't recognize either of them anymore. After dinner, Vanessa stood and said she would start rearranging the living room while Daniel helped me clean up. She moved quickly, almost too quickly, taking down framed photos from the walls. I dried my hands and turned around, just in time to see her pull the largest one from above the fireplace. The family portrait Eddie and I took when Daniel graduated high school. Careful with that, I said sharply. She turned, smiling as if I'd startled her. Relax, Maggie. It's just a photo. She started removing the frame. My stomach dropped. What are you doing? It's too dated. We can get a new one taken. All three of us. Wouldn't that be nice? I stepped forward and took the photo from her hands. I like this one. It stays. Her smile thinned, the pleasant tone fading. You can't live in the past forever. I met her eyes. My voice quiet but firm. The past is the reason this house exists. Without it, none of us would be standing here. She turned away, pretending to tidy the coffee table. But I saw the flash of irritation across her face. When Daniel came in, she slipped into her practiced sweetness, leaning against him and whispering something I couldn't hear. He glanced at me, uneasy, but said nothing. Later that night, I stood outside their room, hearing their voices through the door. I couldn't make out the words, but Vanessa's tone was low and insistent. Daniel's was softer, defensive at first, then quiet. When the house fell silent again, I returned to my room. But sleep didn't come. Around midnight, I went downstairs to get some tea. The living room lights were still on. As I walked in, I froze. The photos that had hung along the hallway were gone. Every single one. The empty nails caught the light from the lamp. Tiny glints of what had been there. I turned slowly, scanning the room. And there she was. Vanessa, crouched near a box by the sofa, wrapping the frames in old newspaper. What are you doing now? My voice cracked. She jumped slightly, then smiled, her tone too casual. Oh, Maggie. I didn't mean to wake you. I'm just packing these up for storage. It'll make the space look cleaner. Storage. I stepped closer. Where? She shrugged. Maybe in the attic. Or the garage. Somewhere out of the way. I looked at the box, filled with pieces of my life. The photo of Eddie teaching Daniel how to ride a bike. The one of our first Christmas in this house. All stacked together like junk. No. Vanessa. Leave them where they were. She straightened slowly, eyes narrowing. Maggie. You have to stop being so controlling. This is why Daniel gets so stressed. You don't let anyone help. My hands clenched at my sides. Help you call, throwing away my memories help. Her smile returned. But it was colder now. I'm just trying to make this place livable. It already is livable, I said. It's been lived in for 40 years. The words hung there between us. She didn't respond. She simply picked up the box, carried it toward the hallway, and left me standing alone. The next morning, Daniel was waiting in the kitchen, his expression tight. Vanessa told me you were upset last night, he said. Upset. She was taking down every memory this family ever had. He sighed. Mom? Please. She's trying to make things better. Maybe you should let her handle the decorating. Decorating. I almost laughed. She's not decorating. Daniel. She's erasing. He rubbed his forehead, his patience thinning. Look. I don't want to argue. Can we just try to keep things peaceful? I wanted to tell him that peace built on silence never lasts. But he was already walking away. That afternoon, the house felt too empty, too clean. I walked the hallway, touching the spots where the pictures used to hang. The nails were gone too. She'd filled the holes with putty, smoothed them over, painted the wall. If I hadn't known better, I'd think the photos had never existed. As I stood there, I heard Vanessa's voice from the porch, light and cheerful. She was talking to someone on the phone. I moved closer, staying behind the curtain. Her laughter floated through the screen door. Don't worry, she was saying. Once the papers are signed, it'll all be mine anyway. The house, the land, everything. He's too soft to say no. And the old lady doesn't even know what's coming. My hand froze on the curtain. I felt the blood drain from my face. When she hung up, I stepped back before she could see me. I stood there for a long time, heart pounding, the words echoing in my head. Papers. Signed. Mine. Upstairs. Daniel's laughter drifted faintly from their room. And for the first time, I wondered if he knew. I walked back to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and looked at the bare walls. The quiet that filled the house no longer felt like peace. It felt like the sound before a storm, the kind that tears things apart before you even know it's coming. That night I sat awake at the kitchen table, long after the house had gone quiet. The clock above the stove ticked slowly, steady as a pulse. But my thoughts were anything but calm. I kept hearing her voice from earlier. That smooth, confident tone. Once the papers are signed, it'll all be mine anyway. The old lady doesn't even know what's coming. I stared at the blank walls, the spots where my family photos used to hang, and felt something shift inside me. Fear. Maybe. But underneath it, something else. Resolve. The next morning, Vanessa acted as if nothing had happened. She came down in her silk robe, poured herself coffee, and hummed a tune I didn't recognize. Daniel followed, half awake, scrolling through his phone. I watched them both from across the table. I had never seen my son so unaware of the world around him, so easily guided. I asked quietly, "Daniel, what papers is she talking about?" He looked up, confused. "What papers?" "The ones she mentioned on the phone yesterday. Something about signing. Something about the house." Vanessa's head snapped toward me, her smile freezing. "What are you talking about?" "Maggie." I held her gaze. "You said it outside. On the porch. I heard you." Her expression changed for only a second. A flicker of annoyance. Then she laughed. "You must have misunderstood. I was talking about work. A client contract." Daniel nodded automatically, still looking at his phone. "See. Mom, probably just a mix-up." I wanted to shout, to shake him awake. But I just took a breath and said, "I'm not deaf. Vanessa, I know what I heard." Her smile vanished. She set her cup down harder than necessary. "Maggie, I think maybe you need to rest. You've been under a lot of stress. You're seeing problems where there aren't any." The words burned. I recognized the tone. The same one people use when they're trying to make someone sound unstable. After breakfast, she left for her so-called errands, and Daniel went to work. The house was silent again. I wandered through each room, touching the walls, the furniture, the window frames Eddie had painted himself. I whispered to him, as if he were still listening. "They think I'm losing it, Eddie." But I know what I heard. That afternoon, I decided to visit someone who might actually believe me. My cousin Elaine lived across town, a retired paralegal who had helped me with paperwork after Eddie died. She was sharp, practical, and not easily fooled. I hadn't told her about everything yet, only that Daniel and his wife had moved in. When she opened the door, she took one look at me and frowned. "Maggie, you look pale. What's going on?" We sat in her kitchen, and I told her everything. From the photos to the overheard phone call. Elaine didn't interrupt, just listened, her eyes narrowing more with each detail. When I finished, she said, "You need to find your property deed. Right now." I blinked. "Why?" "Because if they're planning something legal, that's the first thing they'll go after." My heart started pounding again. I kept it in Eddie's old lockbox in the study, but I hadn't looked at it in years. Elaine reached for her phone. You should also check your mail for anything new about the property. If she's smart, she might try to get you to sign something without realizing what it is. I left soon after, my nerves taut as a string. On the drive home, I couldn't stop glancing at the passenger seat, where Elaine had tucked a small folder with legal notes for me to review. The sky was darkening, heavy with rain, and I gripped the steering wheel tight. When I walked into the house, I could hear voices upstairs. Vanessa and Daniel were talking, low and tense. I froze in the hallway, the carpet soft beneath my feet. Vanessa's voice came through the crack in the door. You said she'd sign it if you told her it was for insurance. Just do it. Daniel sighed. I can't lie to her. She's my mother. She lowered her voice, but I caught every word. She won't even know. Once we handle this, we'll finally be free. I stepped back before they could see me, my pulse hammering. I walked straight to the study and opened the cabinet where the lockbox was supposed to be. The shelf was empty. My stomach turned cold. I checked the drawers, the closet, even under the desk. Nothing. When they finally came downstairs, I was waiting. Where's my lockbox? Vanessa blinked. Your what? The metal box from the study. The one with my papers. She looked at Daniel, feigning confusion. Oh. That old thing. We moved it to the garage for safety. The study was cluttered. I stared at her. I want it back. Now. She smiled, calm as ever. Of course. Maggie. I'll bring it to you later. She didn't. That night, I couldn't eat. The pasta on my plate went cold. Daniel tried to make small talk, asking about my old photo club. But I barely heard him. All I could think about was that missing box and the deed inside. When they went to bed, I crept down the hallway with a flashlight. The garage door creaked softly as I opened it. I searched every corner, behind the boxes of holiday decorations, the gardening tools, even Eddie's old workbench. Nothing. Then, near the trash bins, I saw it, the lockbox, its lid slightly open. My breath caught. I knelt and opened it fully. The papers inside were jumbled. My heart stopped when I saw the blank spot where the property deed used to be. I sat there for a long moment, the cold seeping through my knees. Then I heard a sound behind me. Vanessa stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips. Couldn't sleep. I swallowed hard. Where is it? Where's what? The deed. She tilted her head. Oh. That. It's safe. Daniel and I are just taking care of some paperwork. You should trust us. Maggie. You're not getting any younger. Something in me snapped. I stood, my voice shaking. This house is mine. It was Eddie's and mine. You don't touch my papers. You don't touch anything that belongs to me. She smiled, slow and venomous. Then maybe you should start acting like it before someone decides you're not fit to handle it anymore. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The implication hit me like a slap. She turned and walked away, the sound of her heels echoing through the hall. I stayed there, staring at the open lockbox, my hands trembling. When I finally closed it, I whispered to the dark, I see what you're doing. You won't win. But deep down, a cold fear settled in, because for the first time, I realized she wasn't just trying to erase my memories. She was trying to erase me. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, long and low. Inside the house, everything was still. I sat in the garage until the storm broke, listening to the rain pound against the roof, and knew that something inside me had changed forever. The next morning the rain had stopped, but the sky was still the color of steel. I hadn't slept at all. Every sound in the house made me flinch. Every creak of the floorboard felt like a warning. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee, staring at the lockbox on the counter. It looked so ordinary, sitting there like it hadn't been part of a crime. I called the bank as soon as they opened. My voice was shaking when I asked to confirm if there had been any recent activity involving my property. The woman on the other end, a polite voice named Lisa, told me to come in with identification so she could check. I told her I would be there in an hour. When I left the house, Vanessa was in the driveway, watering her potted plants. She gave me that syrupy smile that always made my stomach turn. Going somewhere? Maggie. Just to the bank, I said. Her expression faltered, just for a second, before she nodded. Oh. How responsible of you. Make sure you don't lose your wallet again, she said lightly, and turned back to her plants. I gripped the steering wheel, the whole drive to the bank, my hands damp with sweat. Portland traffic was quiet that early, the kind of silence that made my thoughts louder. By the time I walked into the building, my pulse was hammering in my ears. Lisa met me at her desk. She was young, maybe late 20s, with a kind smile and calm voice. How can I help you today? Mrs. O'Connor. I took a deep breath. I just want to check something about my mortgage or property records. I think there's been a mistake. She nodded and typed quickly on her computer. Can I see your ID? Please. I handed it over, watching her expression shift as she scrolled. She frowned, clicked twice, then looked up. Mrs. O'Connor. It says here, there was a refinancing filed about 3 months ago. My mouth went dry. Refinancing? I never filed anything. She hesitated. The documents show a joint signature. A co-signer named Vanessa Cruz. I gripped the edge of the desk. That's my daughter-in-law. Lisa blinked. Well. The system shows both names. The loan is for $450,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. No. That's not possible. I didn't sign anything. Lisa turned the screen slightly toward me. The scanned signature was there in black ink, looping and confident. My name, but not my hand. The lines were too smooth, too practiced. That's not mine, I whispered. Someone forged it. Lisa glanced around, lowered her voice. I can't officially say that. But if you believe this is fraudulent, you need to contact the fraud department immediately. She leaned closer. And you should get a lawyer. Mrs. O'Connor. Elder financial exploitation cases like this happen more often than you'd think. Her kindness almost broke me. I thanked her, numb, and walked out of the bank like a ghost. When I got home, Daniel's car was already in the driveway. I walked straight into the house, my heartbeat thudding like a drum. Vanessa was sitting on the couch with her laptop, legs crossed, calm as ever. Daniel was beside her, scrolling through his phone. I threw the papers onto the coffee table. Care to explain this? Daniel looked confused until he saw the logo from the bank. His face went pale. Vanessa's didn't. She leaned back, smiling faintly. Oh. That. You found out faster than I thought. I stared at her. You forged my signature. You used my name to steal against my home. Daniel's head snapped toward her. Vanessa? What is she talking about? She sighed dramatically. It's not stealing. Daniel. It's a refinance. You said we needed money. I handled it. His voice rose. Handled it, with my mother's house. She stood, her calm starting to crack. Don't act innocent. You agreed to it when you signed the insurance paperwork. You knew what it was. He shook his head, backing away. I thought it was life insurance. Not this. I turned to him, my voice trembling but sharp. Daniel. Did you sign anything? He swallowed hard. I don't remember. She said it was just a form. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Oh. Please. Don't make this dramatic. It's done. We needed the money. It's not like your mother's living forever. The words hit me like a slap. I felt my knees weaken. But I steadied myself on the edge of the couch. You used my house as collateral, I said quietly. She shrugged. Technically our house now. Right. Daniel's voice cracked. You can't talk to her like that. She spun toward him. Don't start pretending you care. You were fine with it when I said we could pay off your debt. I looked between them. The room spinning. Debt. What debt? Daniel looked at the floor. Credit cards. A business loan that went bad. I was trying to fix it before you found out. I sank into the chair. The papers trembling in my hand. Eddie had worked 3 jobs to pay this house off. Every corner of it was built with his hands. And now they had sold it out from under me. I looked up at Vanessa. You think money gives you the right to erase people. But you don't understand what you've touched. She smiled. That cold, perfect smile. What? Your precious memories, newsflash. Maggie. The bank doesn't care about those. Daniel whispered her name. But she didn't stop. Maybe it's time someone made use of this place. You're alone here. Drowning in old ghosts. Let it go. My voice came out low. Steadier than I felt. Get out of my house. Her eyebrows lifted. Excuse me. You heard me. Get out. She laughed softly. Oh. Maggie. You're adorable. You can't throw me out of a house I co-own. Daniel tried to speak. But I turned to him. You too. Daniel. I need you both gone. He shook his head. Tears in his eyes. Mom. Please. I didn't mean for this to happen. I pointed to the door. Then fix it. Vanessa crossed her arms. Glaring. You're acting insane. You could have just trusted us. Trusted you, I said. You forged my name. Stole my deed. And lied to my son. She picked up her bag. Muttering something under her breath as she stormed upstairs. Daniel followed her. Calling her name. I stood there. Staring at the living room that suddenly looked like a stranger's home. When they were gone, I sank to the floor. The papers slipped from my hand, scattering across the hardwood like fallen leaves. The words swam before my eyes, blurry with tears. After a while, I gathered them up, stacked them neatly, and placed them on the counter beside the lockbox. The rain had started again, soft against the windows. I stared out into the gray sky. The kind Eddie used to love because it made the light perfect for photographs. I whispered to the empty room. Eddie. They took everything. And in that moment, I felt something fierce rise up inside me. Not grief. Not even fear. It was anger. Quiet, but solid. Like a storm gathering its strength. They thought they could take my home, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. I didn't move. I sat there in the dim light until the rain stopped, already knowing what I needed to do next. The next morning, I called Eleanor. She was one of the few people I still trusted. An old friend from church who had spent 40 years as a lawyer before she retired. When she picked up, I barely managed to say her name before my voice broke. She didn't waste time with sympathy. Come over. Maggie. Bring everything you have. Her house was 10 minutes away. A small brick bungalow with a rose garden out front. She opened the door before I even knocked. Wearing her usual reading glasses and a sweater that looked too big for her. One look at my face and she just said, Kitchen. We sat at the table. Papers spread between us. She read each one slowly, her finger tracing the forged signature. When she finally looked up, her expression was grim. This isn't just fraud. This is elder financial exploitation. If the loan has been processed and money withdrawn, you could lose the house. I gripped my hands together to stop them from shaking. Can I fix it? You can fight it, she said. But you'll need help. I know a guy downtown who handles these cases. His name is Russell Martinez. He's tough and he's honest. You'll like him. Her voice softened. Maggie. I warned you about Vanessa the first time I met her. I nodded. Ashamed. I thought I was helping them. I thought if I gave them a home, they'd feel safe. Eleanor reached across the table and touched my hand. They took advantage of your kindness. That's not on you. Before I left, she gave me a thick envelope with contact information and notes written in her neat handwriting. Call him today, she said. Don't wait. By the time I got back home, my resolve had hardened. The house looked different now. Not just because of what they'd done, but because of what I knew. It wasn't a home anymore. It was evidence. I went into my bedroom, closed the door, and called Martinez's office. His assistant put me through, and I explained everything. My voice trembled at first, but once I started, I couldn't stop. I told him about the forged signature, the missing deed, the refinance. When I finished, there was a pause on the line. Mrs. O'Connor, he said finally. I've handled dozens of cases like this. You're not alone. If you're willing to fight, I'll help you get your house back. I blinked hard to keep the tears from falling. Thank you, I said. He told me to come by the next morning with whatever paperwork I had left. When I hung up, I sat for a moment. The phone, still in my hand. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to control. That evening, I drove to church. The parking lot was almost empty. Pastor Evelyn was in her office, reading by lamplight. She looked up, surprised to see me. Maggie. It's been a while. I sat down across from her, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I told her about Vanessa, about the lies, about Daniel's silence. She listened quietly, her hands folded. When I was done, I said, I keep thinking maybe if I had been stronger, she wouldn't have done this. Evelyn shook her head. Strength doesn't stop cruelty, Maggie. It just helps you survive it. I looked at her, tears slipping down my face. How do I fight back without becoming like her? She smiled gently. Justice isn't revenge. It's remembering who you are and refusing to let them rewrite your story. Her words stayed with me as I drove home. The night air was cool, the streets empty, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel quite so powerless. When I got back, the house was dark except for the faint glow of the TV upstairs. I went to the garage and started organizing every piece of paper I could find. I labeled envelopes with sticky notes: bank, insurance, title, taxes. I was methodical, focused. Eddie had always said that clarity was power. Around midnight, I heard footsteps. Daniel stood in the doorway, barefoot, eyes puffy from sleep. Mom, what are you doing? I didn't look up. Finding what's mine, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. Vanessa says you're overreacting, that we can fix this if you just calm down. I stopped sorting and looked at him. She forged my name, Daniel. Do you understand what that means? That's not a mistake. That's a crime. He hesitated. Maybe it's not that simple. It is, I said. You just don't want to see it. He looked at the papers on the floor, guilt flickering across his face. I'll talk to her, he muttered, and turned to leave. I said quietly, she's going to ruin you, too. He paused but didn't answer. When he was gone, I let myself cry for the first time that day. Silent tears that fell onto the papers in my lap. The next morning, I met Martinez in his office downtown. The building smelled of coffee and old carpet. He was in his 50s, with kind eyes and a voice that carried authority without arrogance. After reviewing the papers, he nodded. This is textbook exploitation, he said. Vanessa's name appears on multiple forms, and your signature was copied from older documents. She likely used an online notary. We'll subpoena everything. Can I stop the bank from taking the house? I asked. He leaned back, thinking. If we act fast. Yes. I can file a temporary injunction, but I'll need witnesses and proof that you didn't authorize any of this. I told him about the neighbor, Frank, who had seen Vanessa throwing away my old albums. About the phone call I overheard. He wrote everything down carefully. He looked up. You're doing the right thing. Most people your age are too scared to fight. I smiled weakly. Fear's still there. I'm just tired of pretending. It keeps me safe. Before I left, he handed me a card with a hotline number. These people can help if you need emotional support, he said. It's a group called Senior Legal Aid. They help older folks who've been taken advantage of. That night, I called them. A woman named Carla answered, her voice warm and steady. She told me she'd gone through something similar, that her own daughter had stolen from her. She said, "It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." I stayed on the line with her for almost an hour. When I hung up, the house felt a little less heavy. Later, I stood by the window, looking out at the yard. The roses Eddie planted were still blooming despite the cold. I thought about all the women who must have stood in houses like mine, betrayed by the people they loved most. I thought about how easy it was to be erased, and how hard it was to fight for your own name. The next day, Martinez called. He'd found something. A copy of the loan application. Vanessa's name listed as power of attorney. She forged that too. He said, "But it's enough to build a case. We'll get her." When I hung up, I stared at the phone, my reflection faint in the screen. For the first time in months, I felt steady. The fear was still there, but it had somewhere to go now. I walked outside. The morning air cool and sharp. The sky was pale blue. The kind of light Eddie would have loved. I whispered his name and felt a calm settle over me. They thought I was weak, I said to the wind. But they were wrong. Then I went back inside, locked the door, and began gathering everything I needed to take them down. Martinez kept his word. Within a week, he filed an injunction to freeze the loan and opened a fraud investigation. I spent my days gathering proof, copying every document, every letter, even old emails that had anything to do with the house. It was exhausting, but I finally felt like I was doing something that mattered. The fear was still there, but it had turned into focus, like a fire that burned steady instead of wild. Eleanor came by almost every afternoon to check on me. She brought coffee and her old legal pad, flipping through pages as if she were back in her law office. "You're doing good, Maggie," she said one day. "Keep your notes organized. And don't talk to them unless I'm here or Martinez is on the line." I nodded, staring at the front window where Vanessa's car sat parked in the driveway. They still lived here. Still walked around like nothing had changed. The tension in the house was thick enough to choke on. Daniel barely looked me in the eye anymore. When he did, there was guilt there, like he knew something but couldn't bring himself to face it. That night, I heard them arguing upstairs. The walls were thin enough that I could make out the rhythm of their voices, if not the words. Hers sharp, his uncertain. Then, the sound of something slamming. And silence. I sat in the dark, gripping a mug of tea, listening until the quiet pressed against my ears. The next morning, Daniel came downstairs with dark circles under his eyes. He poured coffee without saying a word. I wanted to ask if he was all right, but I didn't trust the answer. Instead, I asked quietly, "Do you still believe she's telling the truth?" He flinched. "Mom, please. I can't do this right now. Can't. Or won't." He didn't respond. He grabbed his keys and left. The front door clicked shut, and I sat there for a long time, feeling the weight of everything unspoken settle around me. Later that day, Martinez called. "We have something," he said. There's a phone recording you might want to hear. He played it for me in his office. Vanessa's voice came through. Smooth and careless. Talking to someone I didn't recognize. The words made my stomach turn. Once the house is sold, I'll take what I need and leave Daniel with whatever's left. The old woman's name is already on the documents. She'll never know. When the recording ended, I sat in stunned silence. Martinez leaned forward. This is good evidence. It shows intent. I swallowed hard. How did you get that? He smiled slightly. Let's just say she talks too much when she thinks no one's listening. Back home, I couldn't look at Vanessa without hearing that voice in my head. That night, I stood outside their door again. Listening. She was on the phone. Laughing softly. Her words drifted through the air like poison. By the time he finds out, it'll be too late. My hand tightened around the doorknob. But I didn't go in. Instead, I turned and walked back to my room. My heart was pounding. But there was something else inside me now. Colder than fear. The next morning, Daniel came down, looking worse than before. He sat at the table, head in his hands. Vanessa's phone rang upstairs. A cheerful tune that didn't fit the mood of the house. He didn't look up when I spoke. Daniel, I know what she's done. I have proof. He didn't move. I leaned forward. You can still fix this. You can tell the truth before she drags you down with her. He looked up then, his eyes red. You don't understand. Mom, she said if I don't go along with it, she'll tell the bank I forged the paperwork too. She says there's no way out. I felt my chest tighten. There's always a way out. I said, you just have to stop protecting her. Before he could answer, Vanessa appeared at the bottom of the stairs. She was smiling, but her eyes were cold. What's going on here? Family meeting. Daniel stood quickly, backing away like a boy caught doing something wrong. Nothing, he said. Vanessa crossed her arms, looking between us. You know, Maggie. It's exhausting, trying to live with someone who hates you for no reason. I stood too. I don't hate you, Vanessa. I just see you for who you are. Her lips curled. And who's that? Aliar. The silence after that was thick. Daniel opened his mouth to say something. But she cut him off. I'm not doing this. She turned and walked out the back door, her heels clicking against the tile. Daniel sank back into his chair. I can't keep this up, he whispered. Then help me stop her, I said. That afternoon, I called Martinez again. He said we needed one more witness. Someone who could back up my story. That's when I thought of Frank, my neighbor. He had seen Vanessa hauling out boxes that day. The ones that held my photo albums and keepsakes. I walked across the street and knocked on his door. Frank opened it, wiping his hands on a towel. Hey there, Maggie. Everything all right? I told him everything, my voice trembling. He listened, his jaw tightening. I remember that day, he said. She was throwing things in her car like she was late for something. I asked if she needed help, and she told me to mind my business. Would you be willing to tell that to my lawyer? I asked. Without hesitation, he nodded. Of course I will. That woman always seemed slick to me. When I got home, Vanessa was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a glass of wine. She looked me over, smirking, outspreading rumors. Maggie. I ignored her and went to the sink to wash my hands. She took a sip and said, You should know. I talked to the bank today. Once the refinance is finalized, this place will sell fast. The market's great right now. My hands stilled under the water. You won't get a dime from this house, I said quietly. She laughed softly. Watch me. That night, I sat in the living room with Eleanor and Martinez, reviewing the final documents before filing. The evidence was solid forged signatures, the audio recording, and Frank's witness statement. When they left, I locked the front door and turned off the lights. Upstairs. Vanessa's voice carried through the ceiling again. Sharp and angry. Daniel tried to calm her down, but she shouted something that made my stomach twist. She said she'd leave as soon as the house sold. That she didn't care what happened to me or him after. I sat in the dark, listening to the sound of her rage. The crash of something hitting the floor. Daniel's muffled apology. Then quiet. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the reflection of the streetlights in the window. The house felt like it was holding its breath again. I whispered to the silence, "I'm not scared anymore." The next morning, I would take everything to the courthouse and sign the paperwork to start the case. But that night, sitting in the dark, I let myself rest. For the first time in months, I felt like the house was listening. It knew I was fighting for it again. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and paper, the kind of scent that clung to memories and judgment. Martinez walked beside me, calm and steady. While I clutched my purse so tight, my knuckles ached. I signed every document he placed before me. My name shaky but still mine. When it was done, he said quietly, "This will stop the sale until the investigation's complete. You did the right thing." On the drive home, I stared out the window at the passing streets, the coffee shops and small houses, the people walking dogs and carrying groceries. All of them living lives untouched by betrayal. I used to be one of them, before my own family became strangers. When I pulled into the driveway, Vanessa's car was gone. Daniel's truck was still there, but the blinds in their room were drawn. I went inside and found the house silent. It should have felt peaceful, but instead, it felt like the calm before something cruel. Around noon, I sat in the living room, flipping through the album I had salvaged. The corners of the photos were bent, but the faces inside were still whole. Eddie, smiling in the garden. Daniel at 10, holding up a baseball trophy. I traced their outlines with my finger and whispered, "Hold on for me." The front door opened without warning. Vanessa walked in, wearing dark sunglasses and carrying shopping bags. She looked at me like I was a tenant who had overstayed her welcome. "You're home," she said, setting the bags on the counter. "Good. We need to talk." I closed the album and stood. "About what?" She smiled faintly, her lipstick too perfect. "About boundaries. You've been making things very uncomfortable lately. Calling lawyers, talking to the bank. You're creating unnecessary drama." My hands tightened around the album. "Unnecessary. You stole from me." Her smile didn't fade. "Oh. Maggie. You're confused again. You signed everything. Remember?" I stepped closer. "I remember exactly what I signed, and I remember what I didn't." Her eyes darkened. She walked toward the living room window, looking out at the street like she owned the view. "You should be careful," she said softly. "At your age, stress can do terrible things to your memory." The threat was barely disguised. I felt my pulse thudding in my ears. "You can stop pretending. The bank knows. The court knows. It's over." She turned, her face calm but her jaw tight. "You think anyone's going to believe a lonely old woman over me?" Before I could answer, the front door opened again. Daniel stepped inside, stopping short when he saw us. He looked from her to me, his shoulders tense. "What's going on?" Vanessa smiled sweetly. "Just a little chat." I turned to Daniel. "She forged my name. She's been lying to you from the start. I have proof." He froze, eyes darting between us. Vanessa laughed softly, moving to his side. "Don't let her fill your head with nonsense. You know how she gets." Something inside me snapped. "Stop talking like I'm not standing here." Vanessa sighed, as if she were tired of a child's tantrum. "Maggie, please. You're embarrassing yourself." I took a deep breath and said the words that had been waiting for weeks. This house is mine. You have 24 hours to leave. Daniel's head jerked up. Mom. What are you doing? What I should have done months ago. Vanessa crossed her arms. You can't throw me out. I'm on the paperwork. Not anymore. My voice was steady. The court froze the loan. You forged everything. The house is protected now. Her expression flickered. The first crack in her composure. That's impossible. Ask your lawyer. I said. Or the bank. They'll confirm it. Daniel looked at her. Realization dawning. Vanessa. She opened her mouth. Then shut it again. For the first time. She looked unsure. I watched the mask fall piece by piece. I walked to the old safe near the fireplace and turned the dial. The door creaked open, revealing the original deed and Eddie's will. Both untouched. I held them up. This house was paid for in full before you ever met my son. You never had a claim. Her face went pale. Where did you get that? Where it always was. You just never knew where to look. The silence stretched until Daniel spoke. Is it true? Did you forge the papers? Vanessa's hands shook slightly, but her voice was still sharp. I did what I had to do. You said we needed money. You said we were drowning. Not like this, he said. Not by stealing from my mother. She turned on him. I did it for us. No. You did it for you. The argument broke open like a storm. They shouted over each other while I stood still, holding the papers that had nearly cost me everything. I felt calm, detached, as if I were watching someone else's life unravel. Finally, Daniel shouted. Enough. His voice cracked. But it was the first time I had heard real strength in it. He turned to her. You need to leave. She stared at him, stunned. You're choosing her over me. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Her eyes flicked toward me, full of hate. You'll regret this, she hissed. Maybe, I said quietly, but at least I'll regret it in my own house. She lunged toward me, her hand raised. Daniel stepped between us, blocking her. Don't touch her. For a moment, she just stood there, shaking. Then she pushed past him and stormed toward the stairs. The door slammed so hard the windows rattled. Daniel sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I don't know what to say, he whispered. You don't have to say anything. I told him. You just have to see things clearly now. He nodded, silent tears streaking his face. Upstairs, the sound of drawers slamming echoed through the house. I let her rage, let her pack. I didn't move until I heard the front door open and close again. The sound final this time. For the first time in months, the house was quiet. Not heavy, not fearful, just quiet. I sat down beside Daniel. He looked broken, but I could see the boy I used to know somewhere behind his tired eyes. She's not coming back, he said. No, I said. She isn't. We sat there until the light outside began to fade. The house breathed again, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Later, when Daniel went upstairs, I stayed in the living room. The clock ticked softly on the mantel. I picked up the photo album again, turning to the picture of Eddie on the front porch. Smiling at something out of frame, I said to the empty room, we did it, Eddie. For the first time in a long time, the air felt clean, but I knew it wasn't over. There would still be lawyers, hearings, paperwork. Vanessa wouldn't go quietly. Still, as the last light disappeared from the sky, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. The house was mine again, in every way that mattered. I closed the album and turned off the lamp, the quiet settling around me like a promise. The hearing was set for a Thursday morning. I hadn't slept the night before. The papers sat neatly stacked inside my old leather purse, along with Eddie's will and the original deed. Martinez had gone over everything twice with me. his calm voice, steady and patient. But my hands still trembled when I picked up my cup of coffee. The house was quiet. Daniel had left early, saying he'd meet me at the office. When I arrived, the sky over downtown Portland was low and gray, the kind of sky that looked heavy enough to break open. I sat in the car for a moment, breathing slowly, trying to gather whatever strength I had left. I told myself that this wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about being seen, being heard. Martinez met me in the lobby, dressed in a dark suit, his usual calm confidence grounding me. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. I have to be. Inside the conference room, the air felt too cold, too sterile. There were 4 people waiting, 2 from the bank, a notary, and a woman in a gray suit who represented Vanessa. She was already there, sitting with her arms crossed, perfectly composed, her hair pulled tight into a bun. When she saw me, she smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Daniel sat on the far end of the table, his face pale. He didn't look at her. That gave me a sliver of hope. Martinez began calmly, laying out the evidence. He explained the forged signatures, the fraudulent loan, the recordings, and the witness statements. When he played the audio of Vanessa's voice, saying she'd take what she wanted and leave, the room went quiet. Vanessa's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa herself kept her face still, but I saw the muscles in her jaw tighten. When it was her turn to speak, she leaned forward. "This whole situation is a misunderstanding. Maggie signed the documents. She just doesn't remember. My client has acted in good faith." Martinez didn't let her finish. "Then why was Mrs. Nine O'Connor's signature copied from a 2015 mortgage application? Why was it notarized online by someone who no longer holds a valid license?" The lawyer tried to recover, but Vanessa spoke before she could stop herself. "It doesn't matter. The money's already spent." The bank representative, a serious-looking man with wire glasses, looked up sharply. "Mrs. Cruz, are you admitting the funds were dispersed to your account?" Her face went red. "I just managed it for the family." Martinez leaned back. "Managed. Interesting word choice." Her lawyer placed a hand on her arm, whispering something, but Vanessa pulled away. "You think this old woman deserves everything. She doesn't even need the house. She lives alone, surrounded by junk." The words hit me, but they didn't break me. Not this time. I looked straight at her and said quietly, "You took the things that reminded me who I am. But you didn't take me." The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel finally spoke, his voice raw. "Vanessa, stop. Just stop." She turned to him. "You're really taking her side." He looked at her with something close to pity. "There's no side left." Martinez gathered the papers into a folder and handed them to the notary. "Everything's in writing," he said. "If Mrs. Cruz signs the withdrawal of claim and agrees to return the remaining funds, we'll recommend leniency. Otherwise, we proceed with a full criminal complaint." Vanessa laughed bitterly. "You think I'm scared of that?" Martinez didn't flinch. "You should be." Her lawyer leaned close again, murmuring something too soft to hear. Vanessa's hands trembled slightly as she took the pen. For a moment, she just stared at it, her jaw working like she might refuse. Then she signed. The sound of the pen scratching across paper was the only thing in the room. When she pushed the document away, she didn't look at me. The fight had drained out of her. The notary stamped the papers and handed copies to the bank representative and to Martinez. "That's it," he said quietly. "It's done." Daniel exhaled shakily. He rubbed his eyes, then looked at me. "I'm so sorry, Mom." I put a hand on his arm. "You can't fix the past, Daniel. Just make better choices from now on." Vanessa stood abruptly, gathering her purse. She walked out without a word. The click of her heels faded down the hallway until it disappeared completely. For a few moments, no one moved. Then Martinez turned to me with a small smile. "You just got your house back, Mrs. O'Connor." I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice. After we finished the paperwork, Daniel offered to drive me home. But I told him I needed to walk for a while. The air outside was damp, cool against my skin. I crossed the street and found a small park nearby. Children played near the swings, their laughter cutting through the dull hum of traffic. I sat on a bench and closed my eyes. For so long, I had been waiting for this feeling. But now that it was here, I didn't know what to do with it. Relief didn't come all at once. It crept in quietly, like sunlight after rain. When I got home, the house greeted me with silence. For the first time, that silence didn't scare me. It was mine again. I walked through each room slowly, running my hand along the walls, the furniture, the windowsills. In the living room, I stood by the safe and placed the deed back inside, locking it carefully. Later that evening, Daniel came by. He stood in the doorway, looking smaller somehow. "She's gone," he said, packed her things and left. I nodded. "Good." He hesitated, then added, "I told the bank I'd help pay the debt back. It'll take time, but I want to do it right. That's between you and them." I said, "You'll figure it out." He looked around the house, his voice quiet. "It feels different here now. It feels like home again," I said, before he left. He turned back. "You were right about her. I just didn't want to see it. We all see what we can handle." I said, "You'll be all right." Daniel. After he drove away, I stood at the window, watching the taillights fade into the distance. The night settled over the neighborhood, still and calm. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then stopped. I turned off the lights, leaving only the lamp by the couch. The photographs I had rehung on the walls glowed softly in the warm light. Eddie's face looked back at me from the frame. "Steady and kind," I whispered. "It's over." For a long time, I just stood there, letting the quiet fill me. There was peace. Yes, but also a deep exhaustion. The kind that sits in your bones. Still, underneath it all, there was something new too. A sense of beginning. Outside, the rain started again. Light and steady. I didn't mind. I sat on the couch, listening to it hit the windows, and let my eyes close. The house breathed around me, solid and sure, like it had been waiting for me to come back to it. When I woke the next morning, the rain had stopped. The light coming through the window was soft and golden, the kind that made everything in the house look a little kinder. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the need to brace myself before getting out of bed. The house was still, peaceful in a way it hadn't been since Daniel and Vanessa moved in. I walked downstairs barefoot, the wood cool under my feet, and brewed a pot of coffee. The kitchen smelled like mornings used to smell when Eddie was alive. I sat at the table, wrapped my hands around the mug, and just listened to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. It was strange how silence could feel alive again. Around 9, there was a soft knock at the door. When I opened it, Karen Hill stood there, her short gray hair tucked behind her ears, a folder in her hand. She ran the small community art gallery downtown and had been a friend of Eddie's for years. "Maggie," she said, smiling, "you look different. Lighter somehow." I laughed softly. Maybe that's what happens when the storm finally passes. "Come in, Karen." She followed me to the kitchen and glanced around. The photos were back on the walls, the curtains open, sunlight streaming in. "Looks like the house can breathe again," she said. "It feels like it can," I told her, She opened her folder and slid a flyer across the table. We're hosting a photography exhibition next month. The theme is Memories of Our Time. I thought of you the second I heard it. I looked at the flyer. It was simple. Printed on cream-colored paper with a soft watercolor border. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I hadn't shown my photos to anyone in years. Not since Eddie passed. Karen saw my hesitation. You still have his old camera, don't you? I nodded. In the closet. It still works. Then this is perfect. Bring something to the gallery tomorrow. I'd love to feature you. I smiled but shook my head. I don't know if I have anything worth showing. She gave me a look that said she wasn't taking no for an answer. You have plenty worth showing. You just forgot how to see it. After she left, I stood in the living room, staring at the camera sitting on the shelf. Dust had gathered around it, but the metal still caught the light. Eddie used to say that every photograph was a way of telling time to stop for a second. Maybe that was what I needed now. To stop time. Just long enough to remember the good parts. I spent the rest of the morning sorting through boxes I hadn't opened in years. Old negatives. Prints. Envelopes labeled in Eddie's handwriting. There were hundreds of photos. Landscapes. Family gatherings. Sunsets over the Oregon coast. I found one of Daniel as a boy. Sitting on the front steps, holding a jar full of fireflies. I smiled despite the ache in my chest. That afternoon, Daniel stopped by. He looked tired but calmer. He handed me a small paper bag from the bakery down the street. Thought you might want your favorite concession, he said. Lemon scones. I thanked him and made coffee for both of us. We sat quietly for a few minutes before he spoke. I'm moving into a small apartment near the river. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. That's good, I said. You need space to start over. He nodded, staring at his cup. I still can't believe how far she went. I should have seen it sooner. We all see what we want to see, I said. I just hope you remember who you are next time someone tries to tell you otherwise. He smiled faintly. I will. After he left, the house felt peaceful again. Not lonely. I walked back to the photos spread across the dining table. As I sorted through them, I found one that stopped me cold. It was Eddie standing in the garden. The sun behind him, his camera raised toward me. His shadow stretched long across the grass. I remembered that day. He had told me to turn toward the light. The next morning, I wrapped a few photos in tissue paper and brought them to the gallery. The space smelled faintly of paint and wood polish. Karen was arranging frames on a large white wall when I walked in. She clapped her hands together when she saw me. I was hoping you'd show up. Let's see what you brought. I handed her the envelope. She pulled out the photos carefully, one by one, laying them on the counter. Her expression softened. Maggie. These are beautiful. The one with Eddie in the garden. It's haunting. I felt my throat tighten. He loved that garden. He said it was the only place where time didn't rush him. Karen nodded. This one belongs in the center of the exhibit. I started to protest, but she waved a hand. Trust me. People need to see this. I left the gallery feeling lighter than I had in years. When I got home, the sunlight hit the window just right, and the house filled with that warm golden glow again. I walked through each room slowly, touching the furniture, the pictures, the small things that had survived everything. In the evening, I cooked dinner for myself. Something simple. A little pasta and wine. I played one of Eddie's old jazz records on the turntable and let it fill the house. For the first time, I danced. Not gracefully. Just small steps in the kitchen. My bare feet sliding against the cool tile. When the song ended, I turned off the record and sat down. Through the window, the sky had turned pink and purple. The kind of sunset Eddie would have chased with his camera. I found myself smiling. Later, as I was cleaning up, the phone rang. It was Karen. She sounded excited. Maggie. The committee loves your photos. They want to feature you as one of the main exhibitors. The opening is next week. Will you come? I hesitated, feeling a mix of pride and nerves. Yes, I said finally. I'll be there. After we hung up, I stood by the window, looking at the roses in the yard. The petals were beginning to fade. But even fading, they were still beautiful. I thought about how Eddie would have laughed if he could see me now. Nervous about an art show after fighting off a con artist in my own house. Life has a funny way of coming full circle. I had spent so long being afraid to lose everything. And now that I'd nearly lost it all, I was finally learning what it meant to live again. When the last of the daylight slipped away, I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs. The house creaked softly beneath my feet, the same familiar sound it had always made. I paused halfway up, looking back toward the living room. For the first time in years, it felt alive again, and so did I. The day of the exhibition arrived warm and clear, the kind of late spring afternoon when everything feels new again. I stood outside the Memory Lane Gallery, watching people drift in through the open glass doors, voices rising and falling in an easy hum. I hadn't been to an event like this in years, and for a moment I almost turned around to go home. Then I caught sight of my reflection in the window. My hands were steady, my shoulders were straight. I wasn't the same woman who had sat crying on the floor of her own kitchen a few months ago. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paint and coffee. The walls were lined with framed photographs, black and white and color, each one catching light in a different way. Karen spotted me the moment I walked in and hurried over, her bright scarf fluttering as she moved. Maggie, you made it. Come on. Your work's right in the center. She guided me toward the main wall. There, beneath the soft glow of track lighting, hung my photos. Eddie in the garden, Daniel as a child in his Halloween costume, the Oregon coast at sunset. The largest photo hung in the middle, the one of Eddie holding his camera. Smiling into the light, I stopped a few feet away, my chest tightening. Karen touched my arm gently. He'd be proud of you, she said. I nodded, afraid that if I spoke, my voice would shake. People stopped to look at the photos, murmuring to each other. One woman with silver hair and kind eyes turned to me and said, "These are beautiful. There's so much life in them. Were they all taken by you?" I smiled. Some were. Some by my husband. We shared the same lens for a long time. She nodded, studying the photo of Eddie. You can feel love in this one, like he's still there, behind the glass. Her words caught me off guard. That's exactly what Eddie used to say, that a camera could hold a person's soul if you looked closely enough. Karen called me over to meet a few other photographers, younger ones with digital cameras slung over their shoulders. They asked about my process, my equipment, my history with film. It felt strange but good to talk about something creative again, something that wasn't loss or betrayal. As the afternoon slipped toward evening, I walked around the room slowly, taking it all in. Laughter echoed near the back. Glasses clinked. Music played softly from hidden speakers. It felt like life, real and vibrant. And for the first time in so long, I felt like I belonged to it again. I was standing near the refreshment table when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Mom." I turned. Daniel stood in the doorway, holding a small bouquet of white tulips. His eyes were cautious, as if he wasn't sure he was welcome. I smiled and gestured him closer. "You came." He handed me the flowers. Of course I did. Karen told me about the show. I took the bouquet, the petals soft against my fingers. They were my favorite. Eddie used to plant them every spring. Daniel looked around, his gaze stopping on the photos. "Wow," he said quietly. "I forgot how good you are. They're our story," I said. "Every one of them." He nodded slowly, and I saw something in his eyes shift. Guilt, maybe, but also pride. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, worn leather album. I found this in the garage. I spent the last few weeks putting it back together. I opened it carefully. Inside were pictures I hadn't seen in years. The family trip to Mount Hood. Eddie teaching Daniel to fish. Our old dog Max chasing waves at the beach. Photos I thought were gone forever. Restored and printed anew. I ran my fingers over the glossy pages. Daniel. These are beautiful. He swallowed hard. I just wanted you to have them again. I'm sorry for everything. Mom. For not seeing it sooner. For letting her do what she did. I closed the album and looked at him. I don't need you to be sorry forever. I just need you to remember who you are. He nodded. His eyes wet. I will. We stood there for a moment. Silent but connected in a way we hadn't been for a long time. Karen passed by, smiling when she saw us together. The gallery lights dimmed slightly as evening fell. People began gathering near the front for closing remarks. Karen took the small microphone, thanking everyone for coming and highlighting a few featured artists. When she mentioned my name, people turned and clapped. My face warmed, and I smiled awkwardly, raising a hand in acknowledgement. Afterward, several people came up to me, asking about the photos, asking about Eddie. It was easier to talk about him now. Easier to say his name without feeling like the ground would give way beneath me. Daniel stood quietly beside me, letting me have the moment. When the crowd thinned, he said softly, I'd like to help you frame some of these for home. Maybe hang them in the hallway like before. I nodded. I'd like that. When we stepped outside, the sun had already set. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain from somewhere far away. Daniel walked me to my car, his hands in his pockets. He looked up at the night sky. It's strange, he said. For so long I thought that house was just a place to live. But it's more than that. It's the story of us. I said, every nail, every photo, every scratch on the wall. He smiled. Then I guess I'll start building my own story now. You will, I said. And you'll do it better this time. We hugged, and I felt the same comfort I used to when he was little, when he'd fall asleep on my shoulder after a long day. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the ache of distance between us. When he drove away, I stood by my car for a while, the lights from the gallery glowing behind me. I looked up at the sky, where the stars were beginning to appear one by one. Back home, I placed the tulips in a glass vase on the kitchen table. The house was dark except for the light over the sink. I walked into the living room and stopped in front of the fireplace. The photo of Eddie in the garden hung there now, framed beautifully. Catching the glow from the lamp, I whispered, You were right. Eddie. Light always finds its way back in. Outside, the wind picked up softly, brushing against the windows. I sat on the couch, the album Daniel had given me resting on my lap, and let the quiet settle again. There was no emptiness now, just space. Space for new things to grow, for laughter, for peace. The kind of peace that isn't loud or fragile, but steady and earned. I looked around the room, at the framed photos, the little bits of color that had come back to life, and realized the house wasn't haunted anymore. It was home again, and for the first time in what felt like forever. I was exactly where I was meant to be. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, the world outside still half asleep. The faint hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. Steady and familiar. I sat up slowly, stretching my hands, feeling the stiffness in my shoulders ease. The air smelled faintly of rain and tulips. I went downstairs and opened the curtains. The sky was streaked with soft pink light, and the roses in the garden were wet from dew. For the first time in a long while, I felt completely still inside. Not empty, not waiting. Just calm. I made coffee and carried the mug out to the porch. The wood creaked under my weight. The same sound Eddie used to tease me about when he said, I walked like I was keeping time with the house. I smiled at the memory. It had been months since the court hearing. Vanessa never came back to Portland. Martinez told me she'd taken a plea deal to avoid trial. The bank cleared the fraud from my record. And the deed was officially restored to my name. The papers were all neatly filed in the lockbox again, where they should have always been. Daniel visited every weekend. He was rebuilding his business. Slower this time. Wiser. Sometimes he helped me with repairs around the house. Sometimes we just sat in the backyard talking about nothing. The heaviness between us had lifted. That morning, I opened the mail that had come the day before. A small white envelope from the community gallery sat on top. Inside was a thank you card from Karen, with a photo from the exhibit printed on the front. It showed me standing beside my framed photo of Eddie, smiling into the light. Underneath it, she'd written in her neat handwriting, Your story touched more people than you know. I held the card for a long moment, then set it on the mantel beside the vase of tulips. The house felt full again. Not with noise, but with life. By late morning, Daniel arrived, carrying 2 coffees and a bag of pastries. You're up early, he said, setting the food down. Old habits, I said. The morning's too beautiful to waste. He smiled and handed me a pastry. I saw the flyer at the gallery, he said. They're hosting another event next month. Karen wants to feature your new photos. I raised an eyebrow. New photos. He grinned. I saw your camera on the kitchen table. Don't pretend you haven't been taking pictures again. I laughed softly. Maybe I've taken a few. The light's been too perfect lately to ignore. We sat on the porch, eating, watching the neighborhood wake up. A couple walked their dog across the street. A kid rode past on a red bicycle. The world felt simple again, grounded in little things that mattered. After he left, I went back inside and took my camera from the shelf. The strap was worn, the metal cool in my hands. I cleaned the lens carefully, then stepped out into the yard. The roses glistened in the sunlight. I lifted the camera, framed the shot, and pressed the shutter. The sound clicked through the air like a heartbeat. That afternoon, I took a drive to the coast. The sky opened wide above the highway, blue and endless. I rolled the windows down and let the wind move through the car, carrying the scent of salt and pine. When I reached Cannon Beach, I parked near the dunes and walked barefoot along the shore. The sand was cool and soft, the waves curling gently at my feet. Eddie and I had spent our anniversary here every year. We used to sit on this same stretch of sand, passing his old camera back and forth, taking pictures of each other until the light disappeared. I knelt and set the camera in the sand beside me. For a moment, I just listened to the ocean, that eternal rhythm that never stopped, no matter what life took away. Then I raised the camera and took a picture of the horizon, the sea, the sky, the endless stretch of it. A photo of everything and nothing all at once. When I got back home that evening, the sun was sinking low, painting the yard in gold. I printed the photo in my small dark room, watching as the image slowly appeared on the paper. It was simple, just light and water and distance. But somehow it felt like a beginning. I framed it and hung it beside Eddie's portrait in the living room. For a long time, I stood looking at them together, his photo catching light on the left, the ocean stretching into forever on the right, past and future, side by side. The doorbell rang softly, breaking my thoughts. When I opened it, Eleanor stood there, holding a small bottle of wine. Thought you might want to celebrate, she said with a smile. We sat together on the porch, sipping wine and watching the sunset. The air was warm and still, and the sky was a soft wash of pink and orange. She looked at me over her glass. You did it. Maggie, you got your life back. I smiled. Maybe I didn't get it back. Maybe I just found a new one inside the old one. She nodded. That's what healing really is. As darkness settled, we talked about small things. The kind of conversations that don't need to mean much to matter. When she left, I stayed outside. The night wrapping around me, fireflies blinked near the bushes. Tiny sparks of life in the dark. I thought about everything that had happened. All the pieces of my story. The betrayal. The loss. The fight. The rediscovery. It wasn't clean or easy. But it was mine. I stood, brushing my hands against my jeans, and looked up at the sky. It was full of stars, clear and bright. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small beneath them. I felt part of something vast and alive. As I turned to go inside, I whispered softly, "Thank you, Eddie, for teaching me how to keep looking for the light." The house waited for me, warm and safe. Inside, the photographs glowed softly in the lamplight. Every frame a chapter, every shadow a reminder. I walked through the rooms slowly, closing each window, letting the night air fade behind me. When I reached the living room, I paused by the fireplace, looking at the photo of the sea. My reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. I smiled at it. At her. The woman who had survived and rebuilt and learned to see again. And as I turned off the last light, I said quietly, "If you're still here with me, wherever you are, I think we finally found peace. If you've ever had to start over, if you've ever been betrayed and found your way back to yourself, then you know what this feels like. Tell me what moment changed you. What helped you breathe again after the storm? I'd love to hear your story too."